Hey world. This video is a continuation of my last video, which you should watch before you watch this one. In my last video, I gave you my number 5 and my number 4 most politically interesting post-election things to pay attention to, and in this video, I'm going to give you numbers 3 and 2. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get shaken. Tres! Joe Lieberman. 8 years ago, Joe Lieberman was a moderate Democratic senator from Connecticut who ran as Al Gore's running mate in the 2000 presidential election. This year, Joe Lieberman is an independent senator from Connecticut who, while he still caucuses with the Democrats, endorsed and was a fervent supporter of Republican John McCain's campaign for president. So what the heck happened? Well, Lieberman has always been a middle-of-the-spectrum politician, and on matters of national security, he really is pretty conservative. In the 2006 midterm elections, Joe Lieberman was up for re-election, and largely because of his conservative national security leanings, the Democratic Party of the state of Connecticut opted to nominate, instead of Lieberman, a man named Ned Lamont. Lieberman didn't like that. Lieberman ran as an independent. Lieberman won. Now, this made relations between Lieberman and the Democratic Party pretty tense. Ouch. Lieberman still usually voted with the Democrats, but Democrats would probably have liked to have removed Lieberman from his Senate leadership positions and replaced him with someone a little bit more reliably Democratic. The Democrats, however, only had a majority in the Senate by 1 seat. This meant that if Lieberman ever really wanted to, if he ever got pissed off enough at the Democratic Party, he could just switch over to the Republican Party and give control of the entire Senate to the Republicans. Needless to say, Democrats really did not want that to happen, so they had to appease Lieberman to ensure their majority. Knowing this position of power, Lieberman has frequently and comfortably criticized the Democratic Party, and as I said earlier, even went so far as to endorse Republican John McCain for president. After 2 years of power over his own party, however, the tables on Joe Lieberman might just be about to turn. Oh, and this is sign language for turn, in case you didn't know that. See, in last week's elections, while we still don't know the exact outcomes, the Democrats gained a handful of seats in the Senate and will no longer be dependent on Joe Lieberman to maintain their majority. So the question remains, will the Democrats be merciful and allow Joe Lieberman to maintain his Senate leadership positions, or will they knock his Senate leadership positions out from under him and let him... What's the word I'm looking for? Let him crawl over to the Republicans, crying and quivering and saying, "I'm Joe Lieberman, let me into your caucus." Well, while Joe will not be necessary anymore for the Democrats to maintain a basic majority, if the Democrats manage to win the 3 outstanding Senate races, he still might be in a position of power. If Democrats win in Georgia, Minnesota, and Alaska, Joe Lieberman would represent the Democrats' 60th Senate vote, the highly sought-after filibuster-proof majority. If that happens, Democrats are almost surely going to work to keep Lieberman in their caucus, and even if it doesn't happen, they might want to keep Lieberman around just so that they have that extra seat. My prediction is that practicality precedes punishment. I think Lieberman's gonna maintain his committee chairmanships and he's gonna stay in the Democratic caucus. But it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out, so, eyes wide open, pay attention. Number 2! The Minnesota Senate race. It's been clear for quite a while that this year's Minnesota Senate race is going to be quite a doozy, but I don't think anyone predicted that it would turn out as close as it has. Incumbent Republican Senator Norm Coleman faced perhaps the highest profile candidate of this entire election cycle in Democratic challenger, former SNL writer and comedian Al Franken. Now, polls had shown this race as a neck-and-neck, back-and-forth horse race for a very long time, even before Independence Party candidate Dean Barkley jumped into the mix. When Dean Barkley jumped in, things got just totally nuts, and it was crazy, and then the sky started falling, and basically it was really hard to figure out what was going on. What I'm trying to say here is that the race was impossible to predict. So yeah, nobody knew what was going to happen on Election Day, and as it turns out, this is the closest Senate race in Minnesota history. Out of almost 3 million votes cast at the end of election night, the initial total had incumbent Senator Norm Coleman leading Al Franken by just 725 votes. That's a difference of less than 0.0003%. Under Minnesota state law, such a close election allows Franken to ask for a recount, and without hesitation, Al Franken did. The recount hasn't even yet begun, and even so, in between election night and today, because of errors made at polling places and ballots that were counted late, Coleman's lead has shrunk even smaller, now just barely over 200 votes. If you've ever wondered if your vote really matters, I want you to go to Minnesota and ask 200 Democrats who didn't vote. In a situation like this, anything can happen, and I am willing to bet that the legal battles over this race will last us until at least January. In the end, though, my prediction, and it's really just a complete and total random guess, but my prediction is that Al Franken will pull ahead of Norm Coleman by about 1,000 votes. Maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part, because Al Franken would be a freaking awesome senator, but, you know, we're just gonna have to wait and see. So there you go, numbers 3 and 2. Post a comment or video response and let me know what you think, because I really am curious about this sort of thing, and I will see you later with number 1. Or technically, I guess you're the ones that are going to see me later, but whatever. I'm Dan Brown, and I am out. If you like what you just saw, if Dan put you in a state of awe, subscribe to him and click the orange button. It really means something. If you do that, that'd be really cool.